It was, I was noticing how quiet the hall was tonight, so I'm assuming that the meditation practice is going along. Either that or you're snoring so quietly I can't hear you. This would be the last night to talk a little bit about the meditation practice, but I don't know, people will still want to talk about the last phase. We talked about the sitting, the physical postures, and how to do that. Went through the basics, and then we went through the breathing, and the correct and incorrect ways of breathing, and the last one is the simplest. It's what you do with your monkey mind. I'm joking, it's the most difficult. I mean, it's what everything's leading up to. So I'm wondering, do you want to spend a little time going into that a bit, or everybody feels like they got a handle on it? Okay. It's an elusive handle. As soon as you think you got a handle, another one pops up. It's sort of a Hydra-like experience. The ancients, the teachers, my teacher, didn't necessarily prefer or extol any one method of training the mind in the meditation practice. And as you probably know, there's hundreds, maybe thousands of different techniques, or people call meditation topics or methods that are used. And the one thing I have been taught is none of them are intrinsically better than any other. So don't feel as if there's a superior, an inferior, a middling, or a beginning, intermediate, advanced method of training the mind with a meditation topic or focus. They're all equally efficacious, and they're all equally useless. In the sense that the efficaciousness doesn't come from the Dharma, the method itself, but actually comes from the ability you bring, or the gongfu, or the training you bring to using the method. So the efficacious in this is in your sincerity, single-mindedness, and diligence. And that's what makes any method really effective. On the contrary, if the mind is not settled and focused and watching over what happens, then even what seems to be the most transcendent, wonderful Dharma door will be completely useless. So it says, when the 10,000 things return to one, when the mad mind stops, that's efficaciousness. And when the mind moves and runs out, then you're covered in clouds. And so the effectiveness is in your use of it, your application of it, not in the mystery of this particular technique in itself. So some people use breathing. They're mindful of their breathing, and it's a technique. You can observe your breathing, you can count your breaths. There's a whole series of texts devoted to how to do that particular practice. And so you can look into that. It would take weeks to go into all, but essentially it consists of keeping your mind focused on the exhale and the inhale. And again, you're not forcing the exhale and inhale, it's just happening naturally. And all you do is sort of ride your consciousness or your awareness over the top of it. So as the exhale goes out, you follow it, and when an inhale comes in, you follow it, and you can count up to 10, and then repeat that process, and you can count up to 10 and go backwards. It sounds pretty simple, but those of you who probably tried to practice realize to get to 10 is like running a marathon, and to do it again is like getting 2 gold medals. You discover in doing that, and this is good meditation, what you discover in doing that, is that the mind, our mind, the average mind, is very rambunctious, undisciplined, untrained, and given to running all over the place, even though you're sitting here quietly going nowhere. So you can sit here quietly going nowhere, but the mind is just racing backwards, forwards, up and down. And then sometimes it races nowhere. It goes into this dull stillness and thinks, now I've got it. And that's just another type of racing. And the text will talk about that a little bit. Other people use a kind of silent recitation. They'll recite the name of a Buddha or Bodhisattva repeatedly, Amitabha. So they might say Om Mitopo or Namo Amitopo or Namo Amitabha. Those syllables. Some people use the name of the Bodhisattva of great compassion, Avalokiteshvara or Guanyin Bodhisattva, and they'll recite Namo Guanchuyin Pusa or Guanyin Pusa, four sounds. A very common one, and one I've used for a long time, is just simply taking the mantra, the 6-syllable mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. And you see there's 6 sounds, Om Mani Padme Hum, there's 6. And you can internally recite those syllables as if turning a wheel. And you bring your recitation on all of these techniques, again, down to the Dantian area. In other words, it's not here that's reciting, or even here that's reciting, or here that's reciting, but your recitation drops down with your awareness to that place below the navel I was talking about last time. And so it's almost as if you're reciting from here. And you can use the Om Mani Padme Hum and just use it as a technique for holding. You don't want to recite it too fast, or you'll get agitated, and if you recite it too slow, you'll fall into sleepy drowsiness. And so just an even, quiet recitation. If you want to, you can layer the sounds, so to speak, over your inhale and exhale. So as you naturally inhale, with that, instead of counting a breath, you would put the Om. And as you exhale, Ma. Inhale, Ni. Pod. Me. Hum. Om. And then back and forth. So you can, in a sense, it's a training regulation technique to get your body and your chi and your breath coordinated with a focused mind. And by using the breathing with the 6-syllable mantra, you bring them into a kind of synthesis or harmony. So mind and body and breath are all just working with that sound. And this is just a stopping technique in a way. It just, what it does is creates a space or a field of observation so that in that steadiness, as that is your default, you then can observe and watch the mind as it, starts to move, antsy, go out, and blah, blah, blah. And by bringing yourself back to that concentration, even though the mind goes out, you hold a steadiness, and that kind of gives you a backdrop or a background in which you can observe the workings and movements of the minds, the emotion. And by mind, I mean not just your thoughts, and primarily not your thoughts, but your impulses, feelings, emotions, reactions, fantasies, fears, the whole gamut of what we call the workings of the mind, which is much more emotive than we like to think. I guess that's an oxymoron, but than we admit. And most of our actions and behaviors are not driven by considered thought and calculation, but rather by these samskaric, they're called impulses, that come from habitual tendencies, and that we can feel them while they're happening, but they happen so quickly that we hardly get them until they're gone. And it's this where the meditation practice is very useful, because it puts you back into somewhat of a self-control or discipline, where you can actually watch that, and as you get better at this, you watch it, and you can watch it with more detail, so that you can actually start to see before it even comes out the pre-arisings of it, like an emotion like anger or fear. Instead of just it arises, you can kind of see the precursors to it by that quiet meditation, what stirs, what moves, and you can see how it's like a wave that builds. It has, it has a beginning, it has a movement, it has a crest, and then it subsides again. And that's the field of observation allows that to happen. So one of the reasons why we sit in the posture like this is that by gathering in the eyes, ears, the nose, the tongue, and this body in this way, we remove the normal distractions of the 6 sense organs going out. And so when they're quieted, then that field of observation becomes very intently focused on the workings of consciousness of the mind. And at some points, you can say, you're sitting here really quietly and you say, wow, it is deafeningly noisy and busy in there. Now normally it doesn't seem that way and you think, well, meditation's causing that. But actually meditation's just causing you to see that. It's not actually causing that. And in fact, that's going on all the time, even in sleep. And so all you're doing in a sense is nothing magical or mystical. You're getting to know yourself. You're getting to know yourself at the most fundamental level. Not somebody else, but yourself. What makes you go? What makes you move? What makes you react and like and dislike and whatnot? What makes you upset? What makes you happy? You get to see all those things working. And in that knowledge, you can sort of understand what is then driving your actions, and those actions which are driving the results in your life, which is making up your destiny. So it's a kind of autobiographical, deep autobiographical taking stock or inventory. And the thing I want to stress here is, all my teachers said, when you do this, you're going to Terra Incognita, in a sense. You're going to unfamiliar ground, even though it should be the thing that's most familiar to us. It's actually the area we know least, is our own self. And so when you do this, hundreds of thousands of states can arise because you're going into a deep, rich area. And according to the text, it's not an area that's just this life, but it's accumulated lifetime after lifetime after lifetime of thoughts, feelings, emotions, karma, and so forth. And as you quiet, you go into the deeper layers, and the deeper layers of that consciousness, sometimes called the alaya or storehouse, the holding consciousness. And there's a lot in there. Everything you've done, thought, or said usually has a trace. And so sometimes you can get really caught up in the review of those things. They'll be good and bad, pleasant, unpleasant, attractive, unattractive, things you'd rather not look at, things you'd like to look at longer and won't stay. It all just sort of swirls around and comes, but you start to see patterns after a while. You start to see configurations that make up who you are, who you've made yourself to be, and so forth. And so the key in doing this is the idea of equanimity or an impartial mind. In other words, you impartially observe the rise and fall of all these states with an unmoving, unattached, undisturbed, observing mind. So some things will come up and you'll want to grasp onto them and hold them and embrace them and explore them, and you don't. And other things will come up that you want to reject and ignore and push away, and you don't do that either. You simply do the third between rejecting and grasping. Merely observe. Merely observe, watch them. And you'll see, what's interesting is they have no power really of their own except what you give to them in grasping or rejecting. If you don't grasp and reject, they just simply rise and fall on their own, like wave after wave after wave. I imagine in the last 45 minutes here, 10, 20, 100, 100,000 different thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, blah, blah, blah came through. And where are they? They're all gone. None of them stayed. So even if you wanted to grab onto them and write about them when I rang the bell, you'd only get maybe one of a million. And so it's the nature of, this is what you're observing, the nature of these phenomena are called conditioned dharmas. And these conditioned dharmas rise and fall. That's what it means, they're conditioned. Certain conditions come, they come together, they appear to dwell for a while, they fade and they're gone, and then the next one comes. And this is the contemplation you can use in meditation, which is from the Vajra Sutra, and it says all conditioned dharmas, all phenomena, are like dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows, like drops of dew and a flash of lightning. And then the text says, contemplate them thus, in this way. See all things. It doesn't mean they're not real. They are real, but they're not permanent, lasting, substantially, self-existing things. They're just changing the flux and flow of the myriad phenomena. And so when you do the meditation practice, if you're sitting like this, you bring your focus and concentration down here. Now, if you feel it moving away with distractions, then again you anchor it to your meditation topic. And if your meditation topic just can't hold it, it's just like this, kite in the wind that's going to go off, and you really can't get your concentration to hold it, then you use what's called this true suchness contemplation, which is the line from the Vajra text. And you say, all these states, feelings, emotions that are arising, moving, and pulling me, and disturbing me, and so forth, are like dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows, dewdrops, and lightning flash. If I see them thus, you disarm them. You take the power out of them because they're just conditioned arisings. And so you break through it with a kind of analysis of the Vajra Sutra. And thus, by laying it low in that way, you can come back and begin the observation again. Yes?
I've always wondered, there are tunes that go with some of the chants that you were describing, like Namo Guanchurin Pusa. And to my Western ear, at least, they're kind of tuneless. I sort of wish they were prettier. And so I've been wondering, is that because I'm a Westerner and they actually would sound beautiful to someone in that culture, or are they meant to be kind of tuneless because if they were otherwise, we would get pulled by emotions in the course of chanting them?
And there we come back to the efficaciousness question. So if you did a Vivaldi version of Amitabha, or Boccherini, would it be more moving? And you can go down there. Some people will actually take it and go, you start to embellish it, but you have to watch out. Is this inducing me to have more focused awareness, or is just me playing and now working this into something that's really elaborate? And you could make a whole Amitabha song. I bet you could do an opera with Amitabha and Guanyin starring, and you could create this thing, but in a sense, what you're doing is then taking the Dharma and turning it into a false thought or a false mechanism. So that's why the simplicity of it is the art of it. You don't have to associate any chant with it at all. And certainly you don't want to add a chant to it that's going to bother you. But you don't want to add a chant to you that's going to get you euphoric either, because then you're going in another direction. So it's not that the beauty of the sound should move you to ecstasy, but it's rather the singleness of the repetition brings you to stillness. It stills the mind rather than activating it. So the trick is, and it may sound boring, but boring is a reflection of the mad mind's anxiety. It's like when that's taken away, the toy's taken away, then that mad mind that's habituated to this gets nervous. And that nervousness is exactly where you want to look at and empty out, rather than feeding it with a new version of Amitabha, or a 4-part harmony Amitabha, right? I don't know if that makes sense. It's a little tricky. You have to watch what the mind does with these. But remember, the magic is not in the sound or in the syllables, but in your focus of mind that you can still and bring to a total concentration on it. Okay, good question.
So when you are sitting, you're supposed to watch yourself, kind of understand who you are.
You do what when you're sitting?
When you're sitting, you kind of like watching what comes up, so you kind of try to understand what's really in yourself. Then do you use that opportunity to do some reflection?
Like what kind of reflection?
Okay, that if you know that you kind of some kind of like have desire on something, do you do a reflection during the meditation? You kind of knowing that what you are attached to.
Well, the first stage that you do is you just watch. You don't grab and reflect on it, and you don't reject it. You simply observe it, and what's amazing is it just fades away. And then you realize, well, to keep this, I'd have to reflect on this. I'd have to put something, I'd have to make an investment in this thought, right? It's really weak on its own. And it's almost like, so it's like the sound of the one hand clapping. If there's no hand there, this hand just goes through. But if the hand goes up, there's that. And so you don't want to, reflection is tricky here, because reflection can turn into a kind of dwelling on it, kind of attaching to it, kind of psychoanalytic trip. Now you're sitting down with your, therapist with your thoughts. Oh, what do you think? Let's stay with that one, You don't want to do that. You just want to see how they have only power if you attach or grasp and let them go. The next thing that happens, they will, in and of themselves, reveal their quality or nature, whether they're wholesome or unwholesome. In the same way, I give this example, I was talking about food. When you put something in your mouth, it doesn't taste good. You usually go, ugh, and spit it up. Now, if you're not polite, if you go to a dinner, it's delicious, and then you go to the plant and spit it out later. But I think about a kid, a baby, you put something in the baby's mouth, and the baby will, and it comes right out again. Or if they like it, and they smear it all over, and they go for it. So your natural mind instantly knows whether something is wholesome or unwholesome at that level. This is mean almost before good and evil, bad and good arise. There's this natural ability to see and know. And it's very quick, and this is where meditation can give you a little space to catch the obvious. So often the teachers would say, well, you'd ask, is this good or bad, right or wrong? And they said, how is it that you don't know? How is it you don't know? Not how is it that you would know by reflecting and analyzing. So what happens is this quickens your mind, and it restores your energy, because your mind is immediately responding to things as they really are without the filter of interpretation, either dislike or like or whatnot. You're taking things really as they are. And in this state, if you're really true, you will see obviously whether this is wholesome or unwholesome. You'll feel it in your body. Later we'll go through a text where the Buddha advises his son, Rahula, how to use this technique in that way. But it's very spontaneous, it's very immediate, and there's nothing more you had to add to it. Because that adding to it that reflection could also be just another form of rejecting or grasping. I don't know if that helps. So you let it go. It comes, it goes by itself. You let it come, you let it go, you don't invest in it. Okay. So the other thing too is that happens, somebody asked last week about unusual physical, emotional states, or I guess unusual. I don't know what's unusual anymore. If you came through the 60s like I did, there's nothing unusual. Well, my teacher used to say that. He said, if you see everything extraordinary as normal, then there's no problem. So no matter what happens, just see it as normal average. Don't be surprised. I mean, why would we be surprised? Anything that comes out of the human condition should be normal, including madness and ecstasy and everything else. The divine and the demonic is all part of the human spectrum. So I'm not saying that, indulge and go there and everything. I'm just saying don't be surprised. We're always surprised when somebody does something atrocious, and then we think, well, I've had that thought or that feeling, but So there's no surprises in the Dharma realm of the mind. In other words, all the myriad things, as the text says, come from this mind. There's nothing that doesn't arise from this mind. So, that being the case, but there's also nothing to attach to in those things. So that's why when states, we call these states, Jingjie in Chinese, come up, you see them in the same way that you see all conditioned dharmas. Dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows. Yes, they're real. Yes, they seem to be this or that, but they are illusory and impermanent and passing just like everything else. They have no substantial reality, so you can't grasp at them even if you want to. And you can't hold on to them even if you want to. This is the fundamental thing we might get to tonight on emptiness. Emptiness means that things in their fundamental nature have nothing that you can hold or grasp to. We know this. We instinctively know this. You just look in the mirror every day and you know you're not holding on to it. Come on. Run up the stairs. Whew, I'm not holding on to that. Maybe some makeup, you can look like you're holding on to it, but you're not. And so not only can you not hold on to anything, but the very thing that's holding on can't stay. So the holder, me, this, is also in the process of passing away. Whoa. And we know this, but we pretend we don't. So that's how we get attaching and grasping. So since all states are this way, you don't have to react to them, either positively or negatively. So some states will arise physically, emotionally, intellectually, every which way that you are really delightful, happy, joyous, ecstatic. And you simply use the same mind. You bring the mind back and observe their rise and fall and don't go after them. Other states might arise that are anxiety-ridden, fearful, terrible, haunting, and you don't move that way either. So that's why it says without fear, without fondness, you stay right in that middle position. And these things fade by themselves. So this is the key for cultivating the equanimity you need to get that mastery over this mechanism of the mind, is simply start by disengaging or disarming the ups and downs, the loves and dislikes, the fears and the fondnesses. They're all equally empty and all equally cannot be got at and held. And it's funny, you would think, oh, that leads to then a kind of, I don't know, nihilism or dullness. But in fact, it's very enlivening. It's very empowering because you're now not being swept around by all these things that don't have any substance to them at all. And yet, at the end of the day, if it's swept, at the end of the day, there's nothing left except fatigue. We go to sleep, we wake up and do it again. And so the meditation will help you if you use this called this level, equal, even mind to observe in this way. And there's nothing to get. Okay, I want to stress that. There's nothing to get in this technique. What am I here for? To get, not getting. To attain, nothing to attain. So when it says there's nothing to get, it means there's none of these things that can be got at, can be held or grasped or secured. And there's nothing to lose. There's nothing you're going to lose. So there's no reason to have fear, and there's no reason to have a sort of fondness. Now, even though I can say that, fear will arise and fondness will stir. And that's why you come back to the meditation technique, because the technique in that moment says, oh yeah, I was supposed to be counting my breaths, or Om Mani Padme Hum. Where, wow, got way out here. And by coming back, you completely empty those things out automatically. Okay? So the mantra, or whatever you're going to use, is like a keel on a ship. It keeps you from going too far, too lax, it just keeps you moving through the water. And that's how you use it. Okay. I went longer than I want to on that meditation technique. Use whatever one you want to. If you have questions later about them, you can bring them up, and we can talk about them some more. But although the theory is very simple, the application can get a little gnarly. Okay. So we're on page 24, chapter 2. And this chapter is entitled Prajna, or we said is wisdom. Wisdom that says that goes beyond. And we just finished up. Oh, here we go. Let's start in the middle. All Buddha lands are the same as empty space. The wondrous nature of people is originally empty. There is nothing that can be grasped. Just what we were talking about, right? And the true emptiness of the essential nature is the same. So the essential nature that he's talking about is the intrinsic nature, the essential nature is also called Buddha nature. It's the inherent capacity for wisdom and awakening and understanding that is in the makeup of our very being. He says, good and wise are friends, but do not listen to me explain emptiness and then become attached to emptiness. This is tricky, right? Because you think, I know what we want to get. We want to get emptiness. We're coming on Friday night and we're going to get emptiness. How much? I got a lot of emptiness. I got more emptiness than you do. Well, that's not the goal, and emptiness is empty. So it's like, how So don't become attached to emptiness. Now, how do you become attached to emptiness? This is an interesting question. Because you'd say, well, there's nothing, so how can you attach to nothing?
Is it for attached to striving for something, and emptiness is just one manifestation of?
Well, yeah, so striving for emptiness is the actual opposite of emptiness. So striving to get emptiness means you're not even in the ballpark. Okay, so striving for anything is the opposite of emptiness. So the mind that seeks, whatever it seeks for, is the mind that leaves your essential nature. It leaves your innate wholeness and completeness, and it goes on this shopping spree thinking it's going to get something. And this thinking I get something is based on thinking I need something, which is based on thinking I'm deficient, which is based on not recognizing your true essential nature. So the further you go from this, the further you're going to get from anything. And the text says, and you can run faster and faster, and pretty soon you're just going to fall. And it says, the text says it like this: you'll fall face flat in the mud. That's what this frantic search will lead to. So some people then, without changing the mind, change the object of their seeking. So now I'm not seeking fame and wealth and pleasure. I'm seeking emptiness. Okay? And I'm seeking it with the same fervor and same determination that I sought those other things. Winning formula? Not. And so how does it manifest? It manifests when they think, I've stilled my mind. I've suppressed my feelings. Nothing's going on. I am unmoving. I am like a piece of wood. And now I am empty. So love and hate don't move me anymore. Joy and dislike don't move me anymore. You frown at me. Who cares? I don't seek anything whatsoever. I'm completely empty. And he's talking about this not only as a state of mind, but as a meditation thing. That's why he says, if you meditate with a vacant mind, you'll become fixated on a blank emptiness. So now he's moving it over and saying, this you can do in your, quote, meditation practice. And you sort of numb all your awareness and feelings. You actually blot out consciousness and awareness. You repress and push it down to the point that you think nothing's arising and you've attained emptiness. And he says, he calls this a blank emptiness. It's not a true emptiness, it's a false emptiness. It's a repressed, suffocated awareness. And this is mistaken. Now he's saying this because people who meditate very easily can fall into this state if they're not meditating with the correct theory of not seeking something. If they're meditating to get something, then it quickly is something like this. So what happens when the states arise then, when the good states arise, they're trying to collect them, you know. Like trout fishermen up in Maine, when I watch them, they get a fish and they put it in their basket and they get to be collecting all these fish. And they go home with a basket full of fish. So when a positive state arises, I want that. How can I get that back? And so a kind of urging arises, and then if it doesn't come back immediately, then an anxiety and a frustration. Well, I was sitting this way. No, I was sitting that way. Well, I was on the Om. No, I was on the Mani. Where was I at that produced that wonderful state? It was before she came in and started coughing. So get rid of, you know, and you go around like this. It's like the superstitious pitchers in the league. You know, I threw a strike when I did this, 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 and this. So every time they're doing this in the mound, you're watching these obsessive neurotic behaviors of these pitchers doing this thing because they're associating this good pitch with the conditions that surrounded it when they first experienced it. So you get into this in meditation, I tell you, you're going to go nuts with good states. And you won't, you know, and then when they don't come, you'll get angry. Now the other thing happens with the bad states. You get into a fearing of those and you don't want to repeat those. So you're trying to think, what did I do to avoid that? And none of this need happen. So there's either blank emptiness or a frantic anxiety. Good and wise friend, the emptiness of the physical universe can embrace, let's read the whole thing, the shapes and forms of the myriad things. The sun, moon, and stars, the mountains, rivers, and the whole earth. The fountains, springs, streams, and torrents. Grasses, trees, thickets, and woods, good and bad people, good and bad dharmas, the heavens and the hells, all the great seas, the entirety of Mount Sumeru and all the mountains. Empty space contains them all. So now he's saying, analogy. Okay, this is an analogy. He's saying just like what we call empty space has everything contained within. An empty space, in fact, is not empty. It's full of all these things moving around. And actually, what we call empty space is also a form of matter. Okay? And it contains all this. So it's like a massive fluid, like the sea contains all these creatures and whatnot. He's saying the emptiness of people's nature is the same. He means the same in its capacity to hold the multiple phenomena of consciousness and its objects and so forth. He's not talking about holding all these things. Okay? Just understand, because you'd say, well, you got all the rivers, lakes, and everything. Ooh, it's not what he's using a metaphor analogy here. And he said, good and wise friends, our own essential nature is able to contain the 10,000 things. That is great. What are the 10,000 things? We put in quotation marks. Also, it's Wanfa. It's not literally 10,000, by the way. The Chinese, 10,000 just meant big, infinite, vast number. Okay. In the entire field of consciousness, the sense organs, the sense objects, the related states of mind and consciousness that go with it, all sensation and feeling, there's 100 dharmas that are associated with this, and it's an actual text we could look at later called the 100 Dharma Shastra, and it describes the nature of the mind and its states. It also means that, as we talked about before, the entire Dharma realm of beings, from the hells up to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, a continuous spectrum of what you would say, manifestation of human consciousness is also within each individual. So it means from us, from this mind, from this nature, we can become awesome, great people, or ne'er-do-wells and harmful and so forth. We can become ghosts, animals, and demons, or we become sages, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. It's elasticity. This is essential nature elasticity. And what it's just plasticity, it's talking about the plasticity of this nature can manifest. So certain thoughts and feelings and habits generate a corresponding me. I become what I think, what I feel, what I do. And change those and you become something different. So we have this elastic plastic quality, and that's what it means. The nature of consciousness is the source of this. So this is where everything comes from the mind. It's this meaning of the Avatamsaka when it says everything is made from this mind, this consciousness alone. That's the meaning. So on one hand, we have incredible power, freedom, okay, range, and at the same time, we also have an equally radical accountability, responsibility. So it's like both apply in this. Whatever we manifest, whatever we become, can be far-reaching and great or small and petty, but we're also responsible for it. It's not like this mechanism is being driven by some outside force, by a god or a deity, or even by fate or chance, or by luck or happenstance. It's actually directed by intentional action of body, mouth, and mind. This is what it's meant by karma. So this is really interesting. He says the myriad dharmas, absolutely everything, are within the nature of all people. If you can regard all people, the bad as well as the good, without grasping or rejecting, free of any clinging, your mind will be like empty space, and this can be called great Maha. So what he's saying is, within this range of possibilities, if you can let go and simply be in the midst of all this without grasping or rejecting, the workings of your mind are not encumbered now. It's by trying to grasp and reject that we limit that consciousness, shrink it down, and then tie it up. Okay? So let's finish this one section here. Good and wise friends, confused people only mouth the words. What words? Huh? Emptiness. Well, they mouth the words emptiness. Or it can mean they mouth all kinds of anything else? Sutras, sacred text. Wise people actually practice with their minds. Moreover, there are deluded people who empty their minds while sitting in quietude, without thinking anything whatsoever, and declare, great, this is great. It is worthless to talk with such people because theirs is a wrong view. Now, wrong view here, you'll see in the footnote, doesn't mean in a sense that it is against the teachings or it's against the doctrine, but rather it's a view, an attitude, and it's a very entrenched attitude and opinion. It's not like, I like flowers or I don't like flowers. This is about a deep, basic orientation of habit and thinking, influenced by craving, aversion, and delusion, and the most important markers that obstructs insight and awakening. That's why it's a wrong view. It's wrong because it's not efficacious. It doesn't lead to the opening and expanding of the mind, but rather to something opposite. This is really important to stress. It's not wrong a priori. It's wrong in its effects. It's wrong in its consequences. It doesn't lead. It's very pragmatic in the sense, if you think about someone like William James, the measure of an idea or a notion is to be seen in its results. Or as my grandmother would say, the proof is in the pudding. No, some of you, nobody got that? Your grandmother said the proof is in the pudding? Pudding. Well, that's another way of saying it. Yeah, the proof of the pudding is in eating. Is that what? Holland? Is that what you say there? The proof is in the pudding mean the proof, the validity of something is seen in the actual tasting of it. So how it's like say, is the pudding good? Well, I look at the recipe and yeah, it's good. Or you look at who made it and you say it couldn't be good. But the proof is actually in tasting the pudding. For example, I always thought, wow, I need to get butter from the store. And this little girl who's like 6 years old came over and she said, I made some butter. I said, yeah, good. I'm giving it to you. It's a friend. She really likes cooking. I said, okay, good. Yeah. And I put it in the refrigerator. And then a day later she goes, did you eat it? No, not yet. I was waiting for some fresh bread. Oh, calls the next day. Did you eat it? No, I'm putting her off because I'm thinking, she's 6 years old. It's got to be yucky, right? What is a 6-year-old? And I wait and wait. Finally, I say, okay, I better do this. So I take it out, spread it on, taste it. It's like the best butter I've ever had. And I'm going, whoa! So the proof is in the pudding. You know, it's like, well, a 6-year-old couldn't do this? Yes, she did. And sometimes a 60-year-old, you go, yuck. So again, what this is talking about is wrong view. It's wrong in that the results it produces are not liberating and awakening, but the opposite. It's wrong in the actual exercise of it. That's how it came about. So, just to be clear about that. Okay, wow. Maybe next time I will talk a little more about this emptiness and compare it to other schools of thought. For example, there's an emptiness that's talked about in the Bible. I was going to bring that up next week. If you have an aversion for the Bible, you might just do it online, but you could come. I'm not going to try to convert anybody to anything. Also, there's some Western philosophy that talks about emptiness, and I was going to compare some of those thinking to the Buddhist notion of emptiness to get at that a little bit. But this, I'll just end with a quick story about the emptiness in the mouth and the mind that practices. Often what happens when people do this practice of sitting meditation, what it means they practice with the mouth, is they get into what's called koto-chan, which is literally head-mouth Zen. In other words, they sit around and pour tea and talk about emptiness, or talk about unattachment, and so forth, and talk about these states of awakening. This was not uncommon in the past, and it's still going around. I don't know if you know anybody who talks like that way, or if you get at some gathering, there's a party, and somebody says, "Oh yeah, I do Zen. I reached the fourth, blah, blah, blah." It's around, believe me. And so, and often when we were traveling with my teacher, sort of self-certified practitioners would come up and in their own ways do challenges. Like I told you, the one of someone asked, my master was obviously a monk and so forth, so the person said, why did you leave home to become a monk? And it wasn't just a question, it was a challenge. And his answer was really interesting. He said, if you can understand why you can't and don't, you'll understand why I did. And it was like, all of a sudden the reverse took place, because it was meant to throw him off in the sense of saying, well, can't you cultivate enlightenment without leaving home, like I did? And so the master just turned around and said, well, if you can understand why you can't put it down, you'll understand why you did. So the emptiness comes to mind was this. We were at some place in Kuala Lumpur, and the master was talking about prajna and emptiness and so forth, and finally, and I guess I found out later that this person was well known to everybody there as sort of the self-appointed teacher who had attained prajna emptiness, and so basically disdained anybody who came to talk back, and finally raised his hand. He said, Master, since I have realized prajna emptiness, why do I need to cultivate? That's a good question, right? You think about it, because when you actually realize this state, you are in a state of cultivation without even thinking about it. It is in fact the realization. So the master's response was, oh, sir, since you have realized that everything is empty, why do you need to ask? And if you think about it, just totally pull. And then he entered the silence of Vimalakirti. Didn't say anything after that. So next time, I don't want to run you over time-wise. Next time we won't be talking anymore about the sitting practice, and we'll spend more time going to the text and maybe illustrate you some other stories about this. So you get a sense that although it seems to be talking about very profound things, it's actually in the ordinary exchanges that this manifester doesn't. So we'll stop for tonight here. Any questions, announcements?
So
that just conveys your voice out to the Dharma realm.
oh, it doesn't work.
And here nobody hears you any better or worse.
I don't know if the room needs. I don't know if the Dharma realm needs to know this. But, okay, so basically,
So that'll mean
tomorrow-
everybody will tune in.
Yeah. Tomorrow, we actually have quite a few. I do not know if it's for some reason this last month, a lot of people in the community passed away. So we're actually having 5 memorial services at the same time tomorrow morning, from 9 to 10:30. And if people are able, we were hoping to set up a little bit this evening. So some people are willing just to help out a little bit afterwards. We just take maybe half of those red chairs and put them in the dining hall, and put out a couple tables. So I think if 10 people are interested in helping out, probably just take maybe 10 minutes. What else? And otherwise, we have our normal kind of daily activities tomorrow. It's this regular community. Rather than do our regular Dharma practice, we'll be doing the memorial service. We'll also be reciting the Buddha's name in the afternoon. The regular meditation sits are still happening from in morning 6:15 to 7:15, and the evenings 5:15 to 6:15. We have our evening sermon at 6:30. We have our regular sutra lecture at 7:30 to 9. Dharma Master Jing Fan will be coming down to lecture on the Avatamsaka Sutra. So it should be a good lecture if people are interested in coming. And I believe that's it. Am I leaving anything else out? Oh yes, I think there'll be calligraphy, and I think the occasion will be trying to write up Duilian, matching couplets. If people know anything about Chinese calligraphy, it's a chance to do matching couplets. One of the monks here is named Dharma Master Jingfo, and he's actually a very good calligrapher, and has been doing calligraphy and teaching calligraphy up at the 10,000 Buddhas, and also recently down here in Berkeley too. So.
By the way, that can also be a meditation practice. Something as simple as calligraphy. You just gather in, you have the paper, the ink, the whole thing, and you just bring your whole attention to focus. It's another way of calming the mind and getting out of the dust. And so our teacher used to encourage us to do a little bit of calligraphy every day. So something like yoga, tai chi, calligraphy, all of these things are what they call aids to the way. They're complementary practices that bolster this kind of awareness and calm. So even if you don't do good calligraphy and your characters don't make any sense, just playing with the ink and having a good time is not bad. You can.
What time is the memorial tomorrow?
It'll be from 9 to 10:30, and then people can also actually it's probably 9 to 11, and then there'll be probably some there'll be lunch, and then at 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock they'll recite the Buddha's name on behalf of the people who passed away and all living beings as well. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we'll do the transference in English.
Yeah.